Average gross revenue is approaching 2 million. The average gross profit just shy of 400,000, and then the median break even is only 7 months. And these are all item 19 numbers that we pull from our FTD. We have multiple verticals. We currently have 3 verticals that you can choose from. You can go into commercial, which is the largest segment of the staffing industry that comprises about 75% of it. And that would include light industrial, administrative, clerical, professional. And then we have a healthcare vertical, and then we have an IT vertical. Those people tend to come with either the healthcare or the IT. They tend to come with that background or come from that background so that the learning curve is a little shorter. The terminology is a little more familiar, but those are the 3 verticals that we do offer. So the royalty fees, we do a couple things here. So one, our royalty fees are based on the gross wages, not the gross revenue or gross profit in our system. So some of you that have sold other systems out there have seen kind of a traditional method is to base it on the gross revenue or the bill rate to the client. Some of the larger players out there you've seen do it on a gross margin, so the spread between the bill rate and the pay rate. And then what we have chosen to do is go off gross wages. One, because it makes more sense. It's easier to calculate. It helps in the sales process so that you're not constantly having this revolving door of, adjust the price here and then your margin goes down or up and your royalty fee changes. So it at least can get your cost of sales in a fixed format. So normally what we've seen is when we compare it to other systems, it comes out to be 15 to 40% more cost effective. And then the other thing we did last year is we put a halt on royalty and marketing fees for the first 6 months of operation. So once they sign their franchise agreement, the next 6 months, they have no royalty fee and they have no marketing fee. Just another thing we've done to help get those businesses off the ground a little quicker. The territory size compared to some of the other opportunities out there, you'll see territories kind of carved up by zip code or kind of by major highways or thoroughfares. What we've done is in the majority of the territories out there, they are by county. So I would say out of the largest 400 counties out there, there's probably about 385 of them where you would get the entire county, not just a segment of it. In the major counties, those major ones like Maricopa in Arizona or Dallas County in Dallas, those obviously we have to segment out, but still you might be looking at a Dallas County that's segmented into 4 territories versus maybe 8 or 9 from some of the other players. The back office support, again, very, very high level overview, but what you see is in the orange, you see what a franchise owner really focuses on during their day: identifying a buyer, acquiring clients, fulfilling those clients' needs, and then obviously determining their strategy and executing on their goals. And then the last thing is they do have to do the time entry, which also involves the client billing. But those are all closest to the dollar type activities. Below that line in the blue is where the franchisor comes in. And again, this is maybe 12 of 100 things we do, but obviously we have the proprietary X factor that we constantly work on and improve. We do verified prospect lists to our offices. So we will go through and we will actually verify who the decision maker is, name, address, phone number, email address, and we will upload those into our franchise offices CRMs. We have an automated multi-touch content marketing program that is very efficient, very effective. On the fulfillment side and operations, we have an industry-leading staffing software. We have an automated job board that's part of that. All of our hiring documents are electronic, so it's very, very easy, very up-to-date, very modern. On the management side, as you can imagine, when you're dealing with employees, there are a ton of regulations and laws around that. That's another big component that we handle. So the application compliance, we do a ton of benchmarking and compensation metrics. We send those out weekly, and we help and assist with all the labor law and the compliance. Then on the finance side, we do finance the temporary payroll. So in this business, your largest expense is the expense of the temporaries on assignment. We finance all of that payroll. It's built into the royalty. There's no extra fee for it. There's no extra finance charges for it. We post payments daily into that system so the offices can see what their payments are. We do remit those payments weekly. I think of every other competitor that's out there, they do that once a month. We do it every single week, which obviously helps with cash flow and budgeting. And then finally, the big one, we do payroll and tax processing. So everything you can imagine that deals with the payroll side. So the FICA, FUTA, SUTA tax, the garnishments, the withholdings, all the work comp, the uninsured, all that stuff we handle. The investment to get involved with the Nextaff is for a single territory, it's $40,000. For a 3-pack territory, it's $96,000. And then on a 5-pack territory, it's $144,000. The initial investment range is from $123,000 to $152,000. And then again, as I mentioned, our royalty is based on gross wages. And we actually have a tiered system so that for every 1 million in gross wages you do annually, you can actually achieve certain breakpoints and lower that royalty fee. Once you achieve a breakpoint, you'll never go backwards. So even if you have a really good year followed by a not so good year, your royalty will not ever climb back up. And then we do have a vet friend discount of 20%. The daily operations, you're typically talking Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, 8 to 6. The on-call and remote work is really driven by the vertical that the office would choose to do. Obviously, if they're doing administrative, clerical, IT, that's pretty much a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 kind of gig. If they start getting into shift work, maybe second and third shift on a light industrial client, or if they get into healthcare that operates 24/7, 365, then obviously they do need to be available on those off hours for call-ins and that kind of thing. So it really kind of depends on the vertical that you choose. But I would say most of our offices operate 90% of their business kind of that Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Starting out, all you need is the franchise owner, and then you need one recruiter. Some offices that have a quicker growth plan, they do choose to bring on an admin immediately or maybe a recruiter in training, but that's not necessary. So most of our offices start with the franchise owner doing the sales component and then a recruiter doing the operation side. Store specs, relatively small office, 800 to 1,200 square feet. It can be in professional retail. It can be in Class B, Class A, if you'd like, office space. I would say the majority of our offices choose more of a professional retail so they can get some signage and a little more visibility from the street. And that's typically what they go with. Our ideal candidate, staffing experience is not required. I would say 70% of the people that we bring on board do not have any experience in staffing. The latest records that we have for first year growth have come from non-staffing individuals. We just had our first year sales record that will be broken. That's coming from an individual that had no staffing experience at all. The sales background, though, is necessary. For the franchise owner, this is a B2B sales opportunity, and you do have to have that kind of background to succeed in this business. The executive experience and the P&L knowledge is helpful, not necessary. High energy, it's something that any franchise location is probably going to look for, or any entrepreneur would need, right? High energy, you need to be positive, customer service oriented. You're dealing with people on both sides. Not only are you dealing with people on the client side and fulfillment, you're fulfilling it with people. And so if you don't like people, this is not going to be your business. So background typically is required for IT or healthcare. And then the required liquid capital is $150,000 with a required net worth of $175,000. The training evolves every single time we do another round of it. We improve upon it. This is from our latest data that we did. Right now, we have about 8 hours of onboarding. We have 75 hours of online and virtual, 40 hours of classroom, and then 24 hours on site. And as you can see, we are going to cover A to Z, everything from operations, services, cash control, customer service, marketing, sales, pretty much the gamut. What we are trying to do is we're trying to front load more of it because the ability to do learning management systems and online platforms have greatly improved over the last 5 to 10 years. So we are doing more and more of that up front so that when they come into the classroom here in Overland Park, Kansas, it is more hands-on, not as much textbook type stuff, but we want to get you in there. We want to show you how to do it. We want you to do some hands-on stuff. So we want you to come to class already prepared, understanding the terminology, understanding the software. So what I can see over the next handful of years is more and more of this is going to trend toward the onboarding and the online virtual, so that that classroom is really more of a hands-on working in a live office type training. And then the ongoing support, the founders, like I said, we're involved in every bit of the day to day. I do every founder call. I do every discovery day. I launch every one of the trainings. James Windmiller, my COO and co-founder, he's involved in every discovery day and every bit of training as well. We're here every single day. We have a very long runway. Don't anticipate going anywhere anytime soon. So we've got extensive back office support we've talked about. Our support team handles the first 12 weeks of appointment setting. So when a franchise owner comes on board, we will go through their market, identify a prospect list. We'll do all the validation and scrubbing of that list, upload it in their CRM, and we will actually make calls into their market for them, setting appointments their first 12 weeks while they're doing the same. So it's a way for us to get them off to a fast start. Weekly onboarding calls we do from the time that they sign a franchise agreement all the way to the point where they're ready to kind of let the reins go and take it on their own. So that could be, 3 to 5 months worth of weekly onboarding calls. We do weekly in sales and recruiting debriefs, and then we do monthly group training sessions. Usually those training sessions rotate between sales, operations, and then management. And then it just kind of cycles back. Some of the management ones we also do franchisee roundtables where it's limited to the franchise owners. And that way they can discuss sensitive topics like, terminations or compensation, that kind of stuff. So as a quick recap, we have very large territories. We have reduced the royalty fees not only on an ongoing basis because we do it through gross wages, but for the first 6 months, we don't charge any. We have almost $2 million in average revenues with a break even in about 7 months. Our proprietary X Factor creates a model that is a recurring revenue model to where 75% of your sales should be coming from recurring customers. Very strong brand, positioned for success in both times of high and low unemployment is what we've seen. And then the multiple verticals means that we can match the owner up with a vertical that fits their background and fits their personality. And then we have a back office system that basically takes all of the technical and legal and financial operations piece off of the franchise owners and lets them do what they do best, which is go find the clients, go find people, and then match those two up. So that's Nextaff in about 20 minutes. What I'd like to do now is open it up for any questions that you'd have. And just don't forget to unmute yourself if you can ask a question.
Hey, Cary, my name is Paul Broyles. A couple of quick questions. You've mentioned payroll a couple of times. I'm just unclear. Is this payroll processing sort of a turnkey payroll solution?
Yes. So in the temporary staffing business, we have an applicant tracking system that basically takes the applicants, the clients, and when you put them on an assignment, it matches those two up, which creates the ability to have us come in after you've done your time entry, which is, basically going down a list and saying, Paul worked 40 hours, Chuck worked 40 hours, Jerry worked 30 hours, and submit. That's kind of your process. And then we, the franchisor, take on the payroll processing from there, like an ADP or a Paychex. So we're doing the pay card uploads, we're doing the direct deposits, we're doing any kind of garnishments or withholdings, we're paying all the taxes, benefits, et cetera. So yeah, think about ADP.
I'm sorry, is it just on the employees that you place, or are you doing payroll for the whole client, all of their employees?
Well, that depends. So if the client, if it's a traditional relationship where they want us to just handle the temporaries, that's just us.
Yeah.
Let's say then they have full-time staff. We have resources that we could set them up with on a PEO, but we do not do that. Now, with that said, we do have some clients that, due to the nature of their business, all of their full-time employees are with us. So because it ebbs and like a hotel, for example, in hospitality, they might have their entire hospitality staff with us, or a production company that fluctuates greatly in their production might have all of their production staff with us. So but we don't do their, what you would consider their quote, full-time employees payroll.
Great, thank you. Second quick question. Is there an option for a semi-absentee owner to start, or do you need the franchise owner full-time day one?
The way that it's set up right now, the franchise owner would need to be full-time day one. They would need to get involved in the system, engage, learn it, but it is certainly set up to become semi-absentee. But
Okay.
we've not seen that to be a great way to operate, at least now for us, to have them start out that way. It puts too much stress on the support team, and we need an owner that understands and comprehends the business.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Gary, this is Jerry, can you give us a numeric? $15 in a 40-hour week, and what the fees would be and what we would net back?
Sure. Jerry, the middle part of your question cut out.
Could you just give an numerical example, an actual example of what we would net back, say, on a $15 an hour employee that we placed?
Sure. So let's say you have somebody at $15 an hour, and in our business, a lot of times we talk in terms of markup. So let's say we're going to mark that pay rate up 150%. So that would be $22.50 is the bill rate. So now you have to look at, okay, what are the costs associated with $15 pay? For easy math, let's say you're talking about Social Security, Medicare, work comp, the state unemployment. Let's say it's 15%. So 15 times 1.15 is $17.25. So we basically take $22.50 minus $17 and what I say, 75 cents. So $4.75 an hour.
But does that include your royalty and marketing fees?
That would not. So so on a P&L, that's what you would see as your gross profit.
Okay.
And minus that, so then your $15 an hour, take that times 0.08. So you have $1.20. Let's see, 15 times 0.08. Yeah.
So you'd net about 315, 320.
Yeah. So what I say, 475 minus 20. Yeah. So net about 355. And again, this is going to be a wide range, because the largest factors in your cost of sales are going to be that you can control to a degree, or your work comp and your state unemployment. So
Sure.
if you're, for example, if you're putting somebody out in a clerical assignment and you're spending 30 cents an hour on work comp, and you're in Missouri and you run your state unemployment rate down to 1%, your $15 an hour might cost you, 9%. But if you're like my guy in Tacoma the other day, and he wants to place people out at a granite warehouse site, and the work comp code's like $18 per 100, and Washington's unemployment rate, 4.75, then, so there's going to be a large variance from that based on the unemployment rate and the work comp rate. But as a general rule, that's kind of an easy.
So all the payroll expenses are passed through, and then the 8% is on top of that.
The 8% is just on the pay rate.
Right.
Yeah. So that way they can add it, no different than they would add their work comp expense, or their, work comp's based on payroll, unemployment's based on payroll, Social Security, Medicare are based on payroll. We do the same thing. So it's just a nice, easy thing to add, and then you know what your cost of sales is, and then you can price accordingly without it having to move around. If it's based on the revenue number, if you increase that, then your royalty goes, and it's hard.
Yeah, that answered my question. Thank you very much. What if someone wanted a permanent placement? Say, hey, go out and find me a medical assistant or a receptionist, and they don't want to do temp because they don't want to pay the continuing fees or the how do you bill for that? How is that figured?
It's very similar. So we do direct placements every single week, And all you do is most of the time you will take first year earnings times 20%, and that would be your bill rate to the client. We charge the same rate on direct hire fees as we do on temporary. So let's say it's a $60,000 a year position. 20% of that's 12 grand. So that $12,000 fee times 0.08. So our fee is 960. So we treat the direct hire fee like the gross wage. So a lot of other competitors will charge a higher fee on those. We just charge the same rate.
I'm going to hog the microphone a little bit.
Sure.
So I've been in situations where employer, I hired temporary staff, and they didn't work out. Let's say after 2 weeks, they either said, I don't like to do this, or I don't want to do this, or we just said, this person ain't going to work. And how do you handle that with the client?
So that's just basically ending someone's assignment.
Okay.
So you'd call up and you'd say, hey, Jerry, I talked to ABC company. They're going to go ahead and end your assignment today. Let's take a look and see what else we have on our board, and maybe we can get you out somewhere else. Now that's assuming the temp is somebody you want to place somewhere else.
On the client side, how do you handle that? How do you say, because they engaged you to bring somebody in, you want to keep up good relations with them, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I brought them a dud, and we didn't know it, and and they said, get us somebody else.
Yeah, that's part of the benefit of using a temporary staffing agency, is that they have, whatever your term might be, 90 days, let's say, that you have 90 days to decide whether you want to use them or not. So I don't think it's seen as a negative. It's seen more as glad we didn't hire this person full time ourselves and offer benefits and 401k and everything else. I can just call Cary and say, hey, end his assignment, send me somebody else.
Gotcha.
So now, to your point, if you continue to do that and continue to send them duds, then you have a problem in your recruiting system. But
right.
No, that's very common to see where it's just not a fit. And it could be, this is an accounting person. They know how to 10 key, they know accounting, they know debits, they know credits. They're not a cultural fit. And we didn't know it until they spent a couple weeks out here. We're going to try somebody else.
Right. Okay.
So it's that kind of feedback that goes into eventually modifying and updating our X factor for that client. So eventually what you'll find is in exit interviews, if you start to see repetitive patterns, that's what we start to do with that X factor, is we'll start to modify it, or maybe we change an order or we add something. So for example, we had a client that had tremendous amount of turnover. They started using us. We were sending people out. People just kept turning over. And then when we asked people, they're like, you know what? It's a hemp extraction company. They said, well, it's hot, it's loud, and it stinks. And that was the exit interview over and over and over. And so we said, well, you know what? We're going to make a change. So the final interview is actually going to not occur on our site. We're going to do the final interview at your site, so they can walk through. They can see that it's, it's going to be hot here, it's loud here, and it smells like weed in here. So after that, I don't think they had somebody turn over for 2 months. It's just a little bit of a modification in that process. And, all of a sudden we cut their turnover down to almost nothing.
Okay.
Hey, Cary, there's a question in the chat box, and anyone who doesn't want to come off mute, but if you have a question, feel free to type it in that chat box. But when should a new owner hire a recruiter, and what's the suggested pay?
We just had that topic in a discovery day last week, and we went through detail on that. So the recruiter starts out, we want your recruiter to come to training with you. So that's the answer, is as soon as you sign on board, our internal staff is helping you find that first recruiter. So that's when you want to hire them, which is immediately. The pay is going to vary greatly depending on where you're located. So we had one gentleman that was from Philadelphia. We had one gentleman that was from Tampa. We're doing some recruiting right now for an individual in Omaha. And so you've got wildly different ranges, and it's also going to depend on your vertical. So if you're looking for a light industrial recruiter in Kansas City, that's going to be, you know, $45,000, $45,000, not a problem. If you're looking for an IT recruiter in East Bay, San Francisco, you know, you might be talking $85,000. So we have a number of tools that we use to help gauge that compensation data. But I'd say, as a general rule, assuming you're not in some really remote town and assuming you're not in, you know, one of the high end places, you're probably looking at total comp of somewhere at 50,000, 60,000, especially for that first recruiter. You could go less expensive going forward, having an admin / recruiter in training, certainly bring those folks on at, you know, $15, $18 an hour and train them into it. But starting out day one, you're a brand new business owner, you're learning the business. The last thing you want to be doing is go out in the field to do a sales call and have your recruiter that's been there for 7 days trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing. So we strongly encourage to find somebody that has that background that can get you off to a fast start, help with that. So.
And what's the ramp up time once an agreement's signed to get, you know, fully launched?
I'd say agreement signed, I'd say average is about 90 days. We've had people do it in under 30, which was a major sprint. And I wouldn't recommend it, but I'd say 90 days is a pretty, you know, good pace. You have a lot to do. There's a ton of things that you have to do. There's a ton of training you have to do before you come on board. Finding location. There's really moderate tend to finish, so it's not that big of a holdup. But sometimes what we run into is somebody that finds their ideal location, and you know what? It's like the place that we just moved into. We found the place, loved it, and they said, "Yep, as soon as we can get you in there, it'd be January 1st." That was 5 months ago. So, you know, we had a choice. We could either go somewhere else quicker, or we could wait. And so we chose to wait since we already had another space. But that is one of the holdups that we see is the space. If they get locked into a space, they just have to be in, and it's not available yet. But I'd say 90 days is a good target.
And then currently, what's the split right now between IT, healthcare, and commercial in the system?
If you use split in terms of how many offices we have, then I would say we have, out of the, let's just talk about the ones that are open, about 10% would be IT, probably 40% would be healthcare, and then 50% would be light industrial, professional, admin, clerical. From a revenue standpoint, it probably flips the other way. Healthcare is probably a little bit larger. So healthcare would probably be about 50% of our revenue, light industrial about 40%, and then IT bringing up the final.
And then out of those, which is the fastest growing vertical for Nextaff?
Healthcare. Yep, healthcare is the fastest growing vertical in terms of what we see the most interest in. Currently, I won't say without looking at exact numbers, it's one of the fastest growing in terms of revenue. Most of the offices seem to ramp up fairly quickly. But with that said, I have a 10-year-old industrial office that's just hitting record numbers right now. So, you know, but healthcare seems to be more consistent with the steady growth, the steady demand.
Thank you. Those were all the questions that came in the chat.
Okay.
This is Chuck Henderson. I was wondering, you talk about the franchise and the verticals. How do those interlace? I'm not quite sure I understand that. Do you get a franchise related to a particular vertical, or how does that work?
So the verticals are standalone. So if you choose to have a commercial vertical, that's what you can market and sell. Just like healthcare, you would live in that healthcare vertical, and IT, you'd live in that IT space. So your franchise agreement comes with the ability to have a single vertical. You could purchase more, and you could have both the commercial and the healthcare, but they are separate, treated as separate franchise agreements.
So I guess that begs the question, say if I got into a healthcare vertical, someone else in the same area could get a commercial vertical?
Correct.
Okay.
So what we see though, and the reason why we did it that way is because you typically don't see that crossover where if you're in the light industrial space, the commercial space, you're not set up to do the healthcare side. You're not set up to do the credentialing. You're not set up to do the shift work. And you're not typically calling into a long-term care facility or most of the time even a hospital. So that's the reason we set it up, is because once we saw people going into commercial, they tend to never get out of that vertical. And it was no different than healthcare. Once you got into healthcare, they don't call on warehouses. They're not crossing over into other streams. The only side could be if you ever said, well, what about a hospital that has an IT person? It still goes by the client vertical. So if you're in a hospital, that would be a healthcare vertical. So.
Oh, hi, Cary. This is Paul Lipo here. I have been in IT for the past 30 plus years. One of the challenges that you have, especially in IT, and I believe it will be applicable for other verticals too, is preferred vendors. All these companies, they have the preferred vendors through which they go for staff augmentation, hiring new people and all. So that is one of the challenges if you are an independent consulting firm or you have your own practice, getting into those preferred vendors list. How will Nextaff help with that kind of a model, having that relationship built? Because that is quite necessary for you to build the practice and whatnot. So how will Nextaff help with that?
So you're right. On the large enterprise users of IT, the majority of the time they operate under a vendor management system, of which we are on a handful of those. They also may operate through a managed service provider. We're on the list of some of those as well. What we have seen, and you're right, if that's what you're going after, if you're going after the extremely large, if you're going after where people get a little confused on IT segment vertical, is they think of Google, Facebook, Oracle, they start thinking of technology companies. And while yes, you could do a lot in those technology companies, you are going to have to be on the vendor management system or sometimes get approved on the management service provider. However, what we've seen, and that is going to take you a lot longer to achieve your break even, because those things take sometimes a long time to get going. What we've seen more success with is the smaller, they're large companies, but they have a 20-person IT department. They may not be on a VMS or an MSP. They're companies you wouldn't even think about most of the time calling into, because they're not a technology company. For example, just here in Kansas City, some that I think of are AMC Theaters. Don't really think about that as being a tech company, but they use a lot of technology people. The Federal Reserve Bank use a lot of technology people. ConAgra, Cargill. It's not what you would think of, but they have a tremendous use for technology people. Some are on those lists, some are not. So if you're going into the IT sector, that is definitely part of the business plan, and something we walk through with you is talking about your short-term versus your long-term targets. And we want you to have those large users and those large national players on your radar, but you need to plan that that's going to be a lengthy process, and we need to be going after some of these smaller users that might have 10 or 20 people in their IT department that are kind of flying under everybody's radar.
Got it.
Okay. Any other final questions anyone can think of? Kara, do we have anything else come in? Chuck?
Yeah, just really, you know, the thing is a race to get to the $2 million where, you know, the 9 offices are at. Just really highlight just for a second that you're going into a client, a potential client. Y'all do the screening, set the appointment up. We go in there, and obviously they probably have had a relationship with a staffing service before, probably not a great one. So sort of how does that sales interview go? Just, can you walk us through that for just a second and sort of get a feel for that?
Yeah, so when you say sales interview, are you meaning once I'm sitting there talking to them, or are you talking about how we're getting them?
You're talking to the client about, hey, we're Nextaff, and we want to provide a service. Oh, you know, we've had so-and-so that has tried to provide us, and the people they sent to us really didn't have any ability. So we're just going to do it on our own. And you're trying to make a case for the value that you can offer that company. How would that go? How would that conversation go? Just very briefly.
Yeah. So majority of the time, that's going to happen on the phone, not in person.
Oh.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to call in to a client. First of all, we do a multi-touch marketing approach, and it starts with a value add mailer that we send to them, and we talk about quality, and we talk about how our proprietary X factor is different than anything they've seen before. And so when we call into them, we've already kind of set the tone that we have a differentiator. It's all about quality. And then we have a 4-week automated email that's personalized that goes out to them. And it's all about value, and it's all about quality. So normally when we talk to somebody, you do hear that, yeah, we've tried it and it hasn't really worked, or we're using somebody, we're happy with them. And that goes into kind of overcoming objections that we train on in the training class. But that's really what we're talking about, is how to uncover. And the question usually doesn't come from us saying, hey, my name is Cary with Nextaff. We do X, Y, and Z, and we want to come help you as well. Our intro call actually starts with a question itself. And that question is, you know, hey, Chuck, typically, this is, again, we've already kind of established who I am, what we do a little bit. And I typically will train to ask a couple questions. And that is, Chuck, normally the clients that we see success with, we've usually come to them and they've had one of a couple problems. One, they might not be getting the quality of applicant that they're looking for. Two, they've been using a staffing provider and it just isn't working out. They're not giving them the quality, they're not getting the quantity. Or three, maybe they've done it on their own and it's kind of hit or miss on whether or not they get a quality worker. I don't suppose you've run across any of those kind of issues at your place. And the answer is typically, well, yeah, we do. And then you're into it. So it's a much different approach, but yeah, we would handle that on the phone. Normally when somebody invites us in, it's because we've gone down into that detail. We've talked about what's worked and what's not working. And then we say, well, Chuck, do you mind, can I make a recommendation? Why don't we come out? I can show you briefly about how our X factor works, how I've got quantitative data to back it up. We spend some time talking about what's worked and what's not worked for you. And we'll put together a couple, applicants and run them through your system. And you're either going to like them or you're not going to like them. And we can decide at that point whether or not we either modify the recipe and get better or not. And that process there For every 10 people we enroll in our system, we usually book 2 to 3 appointments and we close 1 to 2 sales. It's a very efficient, very effective model.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody's time today. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me or Kara or Lana. And I look forward to talking to you guys more in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.